Imagine you're navigating the dating scene in 1992.
Right.
You meet someone great, the chemistry is electric, the lights go down, and suddenly you hit a brick wall.
A very real wall.
Yeah, a psychological and terrifyingly physical barrier that practically overnight changed how human beings connect. So, to you, the learner listening with us today, welcome. We are opening up a literal time capsule from that exact highly pivotal moment in cultural history.
It's an incredible artifact.
We've got our hands on excerpts from a groundbreaking 1993 book by Alexandra Penny. It's called How to Make Love to a Man Safely, a new intimate guide to sexy sex in the 90s.
And reading it today is just, it's a remarkable document because we're looking at a text published right in the thick of a massive cultural paradigm shift. It's written with this incredible urgency.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore how the height of the AIDS crisis in the early 90s forced an absolute radical reinvention of heterosexual romance.
It really did.
We're going to look at how people had to learn to balance clinical safety with physical pleasure. Because, suddenly casual, thoughtless passion was a literal life or death gamble.
Yeah, the stakes couldn't have been higher.
Right. And we'll get into how people navigated the sheer awkwardness of bringing up safety, and we'll explore some of the genuinely surprising scientifically backed techniques the author highlighted to elevate intimacy when the old rules were just thrown out the window.
Because it functions as a survival guide, but it's really an intimacy manual. The underlying insight of this entire text is profound. Survival in the 90s literally required humanity to artificially rewire what they found arousing.
Yeah.
They had to take sterile medical precautions and figure out how to make them sexy.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand it, we have to set the scene. It's the early 90s. Magic Johnson has just made his historic announcement that he contracted HIV through heterosexual sex.
Which was a huge shock to the public.
Completely. Until that exact moment, a huge portion of the heterosexual population was operating under this shattered illusion that they were somehow immune to the AIDS crisis. The author describes this shift perfectly through a movie reference.
Oh, the Frankie and Johnny scene.
Yes. She brings up the film Frankie and Johnny with Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer. They're tumbling into bed, peak romance, and she stops and asks if he has rubbers.
And he doesn't.
He doesn't. And the entire romantic mood just stops dead. The scene ends. That was the new reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that new reality required a complete, often painful reevaluation of what trust actually meant.
Right, because trust used to just mean
knowing the person. But the book shares a very sobering anecdote about a 36-year-old real estate broker from Miami named Jack. Jack was having an affair with a separated woman named Joan.
And they were in the same social circle, right?
Exactly the same social background. He knew all her friends. She'd only ever slept with 3 men in her entire life. So, by the standards of the time, Jack looked at the situation and decided she was safe. He trusted her.
Right.
And because he trusted her, he didn't use a condom.
But trust in the 90s turned out to be a very fragile concept. Joan calls him up a few weeks later, absolutely hysterical. It turns out one of the guys she had briefly dated right after her separation, one of those 3 men, was secretly bisexual and had just been seen in a gay bar with his boyfriend.
Which completely changed the equation.
Jack and Joan both rushed to get tested, and thankfully they were okay. But Jack's entire worldview collapsed in that waiting room.
Because he realized a fundamental mathematical flaw in his logic. When he trusted Joan, he wasn't just trusting her. He was trusting some guy he had never even met and everyone that guy had ever slept with.
Which is terrifying when you think about it.
It is. Jack's new 90s motto became, trust and the test.
I was looking at the risk disparities in the text regarding this, and the numbers absolutely blew my mind. Is it really true that women were at a drastically higher physiological risk during this era?
Yes, the biology of HIV is terribly unforgiving, and the author makes a point to emphasize this heavily. The virus itself is actually surprisingly weak outside the body.
Really?
Yeah, it dies quickly in the air and is easily neutralized by bleach or basic spermicides.
Yeah.
But inside the body, it is incredibly resilient. And the physiological reality is that women are at a significantly higher risk of contracting the virus from men than the other way around.
Right.
A 1991 study from the University of California, San Francisco, which is cited in the book, found that if an HIV-negative woman practices unsafe sex with an HIV-positive partner, her odds of being infected are 17.5 to 1.
17.5 to 1? That is staggering.
It is. which is why trusting a partner's sexual history based on their personality or their social circle was a terrible gamble. You're dealing with the biological history of everyone they've ever slept with.
But people were still slow to grasp this, right?
Very slow. The author notes a study of women attending family planning clinics in Pennsylvania, which showed that a massive 72% of those with casual partners never used condoms, even in the early 90s.
Wow. So if the medical stakes were literally life and death and latex was the only answer, how did the average terrified person actually go about buying these things without feeling immense shame? Because up until then, condoms were those dusty boxes hidden behind the pharmacist's counter.
Associated with illicit behavior.
Exactly. Or bought in gas station bathrooms.
And that brings us to one of the most fascinating cultural shifts detailed in the text, the aggressive rebranding of safety. The author actually takes the reader on a late-night trip to Greenwich Village to a store called Condomania.
I loved reading about this place. It sounds like it was basically a cross between a candy store and a Hallmark shop.
But entirely dedicated to prophylactics.
Right. You walk in, bright lights are shining, Pearl Jam is playing over the speakers, and there are just colorful displays everywhere. It transformed condoms from a shameful, hidden product into a mainstream retail experience.
One architect interviewed in the book literally calls condoms the seatbelts of the 90s.
Seatbelts of the 90s.
But the author is very quick to point out that not all seatbelts are created equal. This book serves as a critical education piece because people simply didn't know the mechanics of these materials.
Like the lambskin issue.
Exactly. Lambskin condoms were very popular because they provided more sensation. But the author explicitly warns readers that lambskin is a complete failure for disease prevention. It's naturally porous. The virus can slip right through it. Latex was absolutely mandatory.
And if you're using latex, there is a golden rule that the author practically screams from the rooftops. Keep oil away from your condoms. We're talking Vaseline, baby oil, mineral oil, standard hand lotions.
Which a lot of people were using at the time because they just didn't know any better.
Right. But oil literally dissolves latex on contact. It structurally ruins the barrier within seconds. The source is absolutely adamant that you must only use water-based lubricants.
And it gets even more specific. To create what the CDC at the time was calling a chemical condom, you wanted a lubricant that contained non-oxynol 9.
Non-oxynol 9.
It was highly promoted during this era. It's a spermicide that was shown in lab settings to wipe out the organisms responsible for many sexually transmitted diseases, and it even killed HIV in a test tube.
So it was the backup plan.
More than a backup. The prevailing medical advice was to combine the physical latex barrier with the chemical barrier of non-oxynol 9. That was considered the absolute gold standard for safety.
Condomania wasn't just selling the gold standard, though. The author describes all these wild novelty items, glow-in-the-dark condoms hidden inside real hollowed-out walnut shells.
The walnut shells are so strange.
And my personal favorite, a black condom called the Stealth. The marketing line was literally, "They'll never see you coming."
What's fascinating here is that while it's clever marketing, the author uses those novelties to make a serious point about FDA regulations. She warns that these novelty items are strictly for fun, not for safety.
Because of the dyes.
Exactly. The FDA even had to put out cautions against things like the black condoms because the dye used to color the latex could be a carcinogen and might rub off internally. They were not rated to prevent disease.
It's just wild to think about how aggressively the historical reputation of this item had to be changed. It had to become a colorful conversational piece, a literal joke in a walnut shell, just to lower people's blood pressure enough to buy it and save their own lives.
But buying it was only half the battle. The much larger hurdle, and the one the author dedicates a huge portion of the book to, is how you actually talk to someone about it.
So what does this all mean for the actual dynamic between two people, the condom conversation? The text dives deep into why people were completely paralyzed by the fear of bringing this up.
It was a massive communication gap driven by gender norms.
Women were terrified of looking promiscuous or overly aggressive if they whipped out a condom on a date. On the flip side, men were terrified of losing their erections or ruining the fragile romantic mood by pausing to fumble with a wrapper.
And the book outlines how people tried to bridge this gap creatively, often using humor to diffuse the tension.
Oh, the earring story. There is this amazing anecdote about a woman going on a date who decided to bypass the awkward conversation entirely. She goes out wearing these massive, oversized, hollow earrings.
I love this story.
All through dinner, she's playfully teasing her date, touching the earrings, making a bit of a show of them. Later, when things are getting heavy, she takes one off, hands it to him, and he opens it up to find a condom hidden right inside.
It's a brilliant icebreaker. But not everyone used humor. Some used pure, unadulterated logic. The author tells the story of Miranda, a 27-year-old who took a highly rational approach with her Brazilian boyfriend.
Because he was resistant.
Yes, he was from a different culture where the messaging around AIDS wasn't as prevalent. He didn't think the disease applied to his demographic, and he complained that a condom simply felt less pleasurable.
So she sat him down and literally argued the math. She told him, point blank, that getting 80% pleasure for a long, healthy life is vastly superior to getting 100% pleasure for a very short one.
And she winning over with that.
She did.
This raises an important question, though, which is a crucial psychological barrier the author addresses. How do you communicate these firm boundaries without making the other person feel like they're being rejected or accused of being dirty?
Right, because that's the fear.
The author brings in a sex therapist who offers a very powerful insight. Bringing up safety isn't an accusation, it is a fundamental measure of your own self-worth. If you ask a partner to wear a condom and they refuse, they are explicitly deciding that their temporary, mild physical comfort is worth risking your actual life.
Wow, when you frame it like that, it strips away all the romance and leaves you with a very clear picture of who you are dealing with.
Exactly.
But to avoid getting to that point of clumsy, mid-seduction fumbling and negotiation, the author arrives at a very controversial conclusion for the era. She argues that women simply must take complete control of the situation.
Yes.
They need to go to the store, buy the condoms themselves, and keep them in the medicine cabinet right next to the aspirin and the toothpaste.
By treating it as a standard household health item, she argues it completely removes the stigma of who makes the move. You don't have to carry it in your purse and feel judged. It's just a staple of hygiene and health that exists in your home.
But the author doesn't just stop at clinical safety. The book pivots hard in the second half. She basically says, okay, we've secured the perimeter, we are safe. Now, how do we make this fun again?
She dedicates chapters to proving that safe sex does not have to be sterile.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
This is where we see that active rewiring of arousal we talked about, eroticizing latex.
Exactly. The author features a woman named Suzanne who provides step-by-step instructions on how to seamlessly integrate a condom into foreplay so it doesn't kill the mood. And her first rule is, do not use the standard spermicide ones for this because they taste terrible and will make you gag.
Good advice.
Suzanne recommends using an unlubricated, mint-scented condom.
The technique she outlines involves the woman using her mouth to apply the condom, turning the medical application into an intimate act. She places the rolled-up condom between her lips and her teeth, anchoring the reservoir tip to the roof of her mouth with her tongue.
Okay.
Then, she essentially rolls it down the shaft using a combination of her lips and her hands.
Reading the mechanics of that, it sounds incredibly difficult to pull off smoothly. But the point wasn't necessarily perfect execution, right? The point was the effort to transform the act of putting on a medical device into a highly arousing shared experience.
Yes, and it plays perfectly into what the author discovered about male psychology during her research for this book.
Which was really surprising.
Men didn't just want physical mechanics. They deeply desired a sense of playfulness to cut through the anxiety of the era.
The anxiety was palpable, and playfulness was the antidote. There's a story of a man who absolutely hated blind dates. He goes to pick up this woman, Barbara, at her apartment, expecting the usual awkward small talk.
As she changes the script.
Totally. She opens the door, and the song Shall We Dance is playing in the background. Without even saying hello, she just takes his arm and says, Shall we dance? They literally waltzed around her living room.
He noted that everything she did after that felt sexy, because she completely shattered the tension with play.
The research on the male mind in this text was also really revealing regarding physical touch. It notes that women, perhaps because society always taught them to be delicate, often touch men too lightly. They default to a feathery touch.
But anatomically and psychologically, the men interviewed generally preferred a much firmer touch. One man described the ideal pressure as being similar to gripping a tennis racket. Firm, confident, knowing exactly what you're doing.
It's about direct communication, both physical and verbal. And the author issues a massive warning in this section about the danger of faking orgasms.
She does not hold back on this.
No, she strongly emphasizes that faking it destroys true intimacy. It creates a literal wall of dishonesty. Her argument is that if you fake it, your partner never actually learns what brings you pleasure.
You are essentially turning a mutual connected experience into a solo performance where you are just managing the other person's ego.
Right. She argues that honest feedback, even if it's just saying, I didn't have an orgasm tonight, but I feel incredibly loved and connected to you, is far more powerful for building a lasting bond.
Which naturally serves as the perfect bridge to the new sex techniques the author was so eager to report on, because this was an era where the focus was finally shifting away from the pressure cooker expectation of immediate simultaneous climax.
The medical anxiety of the time actually pushed people to explore prolonged satisfaction over quick completion.
Let's talk about the C.
The coital alignment technique, developed by researchers Eichel and Nobile. This was fascinating to me because it happens in the traditional missionary position, but it changes the mechanics entirely.
Completely different.
Instead of deep thrusting, the man slides up into a riding high position to create continuous direct contact with the clitoris.
And the movement required is completely counterintuitive to natural human instinct. Instead of pulling apart and thrusting, it relies on a very slow, tight seesaw rocking motion.
The stroke only travels about 2 inches.
It requires immense patience and communication because the instinct is always to speed up and grasp at an orgasm. But by maintaining that slow, grinding alignment, the study cited in the text claimed it made orgasm a near certainty for women and deeply intensified the physical connection for men.
Speaking of intensifying things for men, the book goes into something called NEMOs, non-ejaculatory male orgasms.
Dr. William Hartman's research proved that men can actually have multiple orgasms without ejaculating.
The mechanism behind this relies on strengthening the PC muscle, the pubococcygeus muscle.
Wait, so you're saying men were being taught to physically train a muscle to hit the brakes right before the point of no return?
Precisely. It is essentially a Kegel exercise for men. By learning to voluntarily contract this muscle and developing a heightened awareness of their own physical cues, a man can pull back right at the cliff of inevitability.
Wow.
He experiences the neurological and physical rush of an orgasm, but because he suppresses the ejaculation, he avoids the refractory period that usually follows. This allows the intimacy and the physical arousal to continue indefinitely.
It's like bouncing higher and higher on a diving board without ever actually hitting the water. What's wild about all this clinical research is that the author points out Western science was really just catching up to ancient wisdom.
He really was.
The book references the Taoist set of nines, which is a technique used for centuries to prolong pleasure and capture energy. The math behind the set of nines is very specific. It involves a pattern of thrusting designed to prevent rapid climax. You do 9 shallow thrusts, where only the tip enters, followed by 1 deep thrust.
Then 8 shallow, 2 deep.
7 shallow, 3 deep. You work your way down the numbers, aiming to eventually give a woman 1,000 strokes.
I have to imagine that having to focus on counting backwards from 9 while altering physical depth completely changes what your brain is doing during intimacy.
It forces you to be hyper-present.
It shifts the focus entirely from the destination to the journey.
It demands mindfulness. And the text explores that even further with tantric yoga. There is an exercise detailed where the couple partially joins physically and then simply lies completely motionless together for 32 minutes.
Hold on. 32 minutes, literally just lying there. Because I have to be honest, my mind would start wandering to my grocery list or whether I left the oven on by minute 5. Did the author explain how people actually achieved that level of focus without just getting bored or falling asleep?
It is incredibly difficult,
Yeah.
especially in a culture obsessed with performance and friction. But the goal of the 32 minutes is not physical friction. It's merging.
Merging.
It requires focusing intensely on synchronized breathing and visualizing the flow of energy between the two bodies. Practitioners of this tantric method claim that if you can push past the boredom and the restless thoughts around the 28th to 32nd minute, the boundaries between your physical bodies seem to blur.
That sounds intense.
It results in profound, involuntary whole-body responses that transcend standard physical climax. It is the ultimate exercise in being completely present with another human being.
And that, I think, really brings us to the core message of this entire deep dive. The 1990s, with all of its terrifying medical realities and societal panic, fundamentally proved that the most important sexual organ we possess is the brain. The AIDS crisis forced lovers to stop making dangerous assumptions about each other. It forced them to communicate explicitly about their fears, their pasts, and their physical boundaries. And in doing so, it proved that true safety actually requires true intimacy. You really cannot have one without the other.
It is a profound historical lesson about adaptation. And it leaves me with this thought for you to consider as we wrap up today's deep dive. If a microscopic virus forced humanity to completely reinvent the language of courtship, communication, and trust in the 1990s, what invisible cultural or technological forces might be quietly rewriting our rules of intimacy and connection today without us even realizing it?
That is a heavy, brilliant question to chew on. Something to really think about the next time you are navigating the modern dating world. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back to the 90s. Keep questioning, keep communicating, and above all, keep learning. We'll catch you next time.